work consists of providing both advisory services and capacity building to our governments, to our clients. It's important to mention that even when our mission is advisory services, as we're advising the country on a specific restructuring or renegotiation, there's always an aspect of capacity building that is included in the work streams. So let's say there's a whole week of negotiations or a whole week of a given mission. 3 days will be dedicated to sitting across the table and negotiating, and 2 days will be dedicated to taking a step back, gathering the learnings from the 3 days of negotiation and building up on these 3 days of negotiations to draw lessons that will be then used by the country for further negotiations. So that's how we hope to gradually build capacity and close the gaps in terms of exposure. But in terms of specific assistance we've provided to some of our member countries, I'd like to first mention Somalia, and we've been assisting Somalia since the HIPIC days. So that was close to 7, 8 years ago, if not more. We've assisted Somalia in finalization of bilateral agreement with the Paris Club creditors. So that's the basically individual agreement with Paris Club members, building on the framework terms agreed under the enhanced HIPIC initiative, but also negotiation with non-Paris Club creditors. We've often faced with countries that have engagement with non-Paris Club creditors and who therefore have to negotiate on a bilateral basis. So that's also something that we've provided assistance to Somalia with. We're currently guiding them on debt swap arrangements. So that's the structuring and negotiation of a debt for development swap with a specific creditor where 60% of the eligible debt would be cancelled and 40% will be directed to a trust fund that would then be used for public investments. I would also like to mention Central African Republic, République Centrafricaine, whose representative is here on the panel. We're assisting we've been assisting the Central African Republic for a couple of years now with institutional capacity building on sovereign debt. So there's two work streams there. There's this institutional capacity building, which is a mid to long-term initiative, but there's also assistance with non-Paris Club creditors' debt renegotiation, which is also critical for the country because the outcome of these negotiations will also inform their further engagements with the IMF and the potential financial support the Central African Republic is likely to obtain from the IMF. We've also been assisting them with building capacity on the debt sustainability analysis and the debt management strategy. And our colleagues from Global Sovereign Advisory who are present here are embarked with us on this journey. I guess we all have the understanding that mastering your DSA, mastering your debt sustainability analysis is a key driver for addressing your your current debt challenges, but also planning ahead based on the country's strengths and weaknesses, revenue generation, etc. So that DSA work and having the country, or getting the country to develop its domestic abilities to generate its DSA document, master it, and be able to update it as they go is a key requirement. And finally, we're heavily involved in the Zimbabwe debt arrears clearance process. As you know, the African Development Bank has championed the process of Zimbabwe debt arrears clearance, and we alongside the African Development Bank technical and financial advisors, we're also supporting the government of Zimbabwe with the debt sustainability analysis, restructuring restructuring roadmap. We assist the government in every high-level negotiation meetings they have, be it during the spring meetings of the IMF or the annual meetings of the IMF. So we're very close. We're working very closely with the government of Zimbabwe, not only on this debt clearance process, but also looking ahead and building and projecting the debt management solutions for the near future. So that's an illustration of the kind of work we've been doing with our regional member countries.
Very excellent. Thank you. I like the wide array of areas you're helping these countries. The issue about helping them on debt swap, I think that's a major issue some countries are facing in terms of how do we use the available opportunities, resources that are available to be able to get what they want through reducing their debt burdens and so on. Then I think the point too about debt sustainability analysis, it's a very complex system that most countries are grappling with. So helping them to understand better, it's indeed a very positive way to assist these countries. Now let me come to Mrs. Luandamina. Now there's this point about expectations versus realities when it comes to G20 common framework. I know Zambia was one of the countries that really moved forward to engage in when this provision come. I know there were some expectations you had when you did that. Then there were also some realities you saw when you made that attempt. How do you weigh these, expectations versus reality when it comes to using this facility to help reduce the debt burden of Zambia?
Thank you very much. So with regard to Zambia, we are not strangers to restructuring. I think we are among the African countries which participated in HIPC. And from the HIPC process, it took about 10 years from inception until we received the debt forgiveness under HIPC. Coming to the common framework, we were expecting a more timely resolution to our debt problem. It has been shorter than the HIPC process, but I'm not sure it has been timely. I think also simplistic was an expectation because there was a lot of goodwill from the different stakeholders who were involved to come together. I think it's been mentioned that common framework is quite unique because you have non-traditional lenders, non-Paris Club members joining this initiative. So there was a global move to provide lasting solutions. And also, of course, coordination. And now we come to reality. Reality is with a diverse creditor landscape. You have, I won't say competing objectives, but very different objectives. So we had to find common ground across the different groups of creditors. The OCC, which is the Official Creditor Committee for Zambia, took some time to come into place, and even after it came into place, I'm sure our colleagues from Ghana and Chad will attest to this, even when they came together, getting consensus within the committee also did take some time. So for Zambia, from the time the OCC came together to the time that we agreed on an MOU, took about 2 years. And the signing of the MOU should have been in 2023. And then from the MOU, that's more or less an agreement in principle. Signing of the bilateral agreements is also something which takes some time. So for Zambia, the first bilateral agreements were signed towards the end of 2024, and we have continued to sign within 2025. So we have seen it take some time compared to our expectations, but it has been shorter than the HIPC process. I think that is worth noting. We have seen that it's not a simple process. There are a lot of complexities involved. We touched on the DSA. I think the DSA is something which was critical even under our restructuring because we needed a shared understanding of what the exposure was. And we needed a tool which all the different groups of creditors would agree to. And this is where the IMF and World Bank LIC DSF2 came into play because it allowed for each and every creditor to ask the questions, why are you choosing this category of debt and why this much of restructuring is required? So we relied on the support of our partners, the IMF, the World Bank, they came in. And also concepts such as comparability of treatment. I know there have been a lot of conversations around this. The common framework speaks for the bilateral official creditors, but there was a call from the private commercial bonded creditors who were of the view that they had to abide to what the common framework set as a common ground, but they did not necessarily have a lot of input. So Zambia was first, and I think Zambia helped the countries which came behind us. Some of these processes have taken shorter time than for us. So expectation versus reality, not necessarily aligned, but it has been a learning curve, I think, for all the parties involved.
Thank you very much for those very interesting experiences from Zambia. I think you're right. Sometimes expectations never match with realities. But I like the way the country was able to navigate the issue regarding the complexities, for example, because when the common framework came up, everybody thought it was going to be simple. But one reality was the fact that it ended up being like kicking the can down the road. It's not really forgiveness. It's not really cancellation. It's just mere postponement, right? And when countries begin to see the reality with regard to what happens in 2, in 3, in 5 years, then the reality really hits. But again, like I said, it's good to see that you were quickly able to run, to work around that and ensure that the country could deal with it. So now let's come to Chad. Chad, again, is one of the few countries that really had done a lot with respect to making use of this provision of the G20 framework. So is it possible can you tell us about the debt profile of Chad, then the point about the debt composition, creditor composition, and then how that impacted on the restructuring of debt in Chad? How did the G20 framework, common framework, really impacted, given the nature of the credit, of the loan that you had, and also the creditor, like Madame Luadamina mentioned, you have a number of different creditors with different interests, with different, so looking for something that is common to all of them. How did Chad deal with that?
Okay, merci beaucoup, Monsieur Eric. C'est un honneur pour moi de prendre la parole pour parler un peu de l'expérience du Tchad dans le cadre commun de restitution de la dette. Je représente le directeur de la dette, Nicodème, qui est empêché, pour parler un peu de cette expérience. Comme vous le savez, le Tchad est le premier pays qui a demandé dans le cadre commun de restructurer sa dette. Pourquoi le Tchad demande la restructuration de sa dette? Il y a plusieurs facteurs qui ont poussé le Tchad à restructurer sa dette. Vous savez, depuis 2014, le Tchad a fait face à plusieurs défis. Le premier défi, c'est d'abord le choc pétrolier. Le choc pétrolier qui a fait que les recettes de l'État ont baissé et le gouvernement a pris des mesures drastiques pour réformer ses finances publiques. Deuxième défi, c'est le défi de sécurité. Parce que le Tchad a fait face aux menaces de Boko Haram qui a poussé au gouvernement à ne pas lésiner sur ses moyens pour faire face aux attaques de terroristes. Après cela, en 2020, le choc Covid était arrivé et ça a impacté également les finances publiques. Alors, l'analyse de viabilité de la dette du FMI en 2020 révèle que le Tchad est en situation de surendettement élevé. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire? Parce que les défis sont là, il faut trouver un accord avec les créanciers pour restituer la dette. Raison pour laquelle le Tchad a émis une demande pour restituer la dette dans le cadre du G20. S'agissant maintenant de la composition des créanciers, comment le Tchad a pu conclure un accord dans le cadre du G20? Effectivement, c'est une première expérience et c'est une réussite parce que le Tchad a mis en place une stratégie pour négocier d'abord avec ses créanciers bilatéraux à travers un comité de négociation, si bien que le processus a pris un peu de temps. 18 mois d'abord, ils ont trouvé un accord. Et un avantage qu'on peut souligner, le Tchad a réussi à amener un créancier commercial, Glencore, qui a accepté d'aller dans le cadre de restructuration de la dette. Et c'était vraiment un avantage dans ce sens. Et cela a permis à ce que nous puissions finaliser le programme avec le FMI. Et c'était la condition sine qua non pour finaliser le programme avec le FMI. Donc, je pense que le processus était un peu long, mais avec la compréhension de cet créancier, le Tchad a réussi à avoir un accord dans le cadre du G20.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Donatien. The point you made about drastic drop in government revenue is indeed, I can relate to that, especially the second point you made about Boko Haram, insurgencies, and so on. For some of us, we know what impact that will have. Some economic activities could not take place in some parts of the country and so on and so forth. But then it's really interesting. We'll come back to that. But now let me come to you, Mr. Amisa. Again, like the minister said in his opening, Ghana is being looked on today as a classic role model when it comes to debt restructuring. The speed, maybe let me say to a great extent, the accuracy with which it was done. The whole world was just wondering and said, can you really do debt restructuring within such a short period of time? So now, my question to you is, in the process of making that happen, what were the challenges you faced? And what lessons did you also learn that you could share with us that help us to understand how to do the same process? We hope African countries don't get there, but should they get there, what are the lessons that we need to learn when it comes to following the path that Ghana took?
Thank you very much. You quite mentioned that Ghana did it with a bit of some accuracy and some speed, and like the duck, when you see the duck floating majestically on the lake, there's a lot of paddling beneath. So much as it may seem very smooth, in the case of Ghana, it was all but smooth. And listening to my colleagues from Chad and Zambia, some of the challenges, you can just blank out Chad or Zambia and put Ghana there. The common framework is really living up to its name. Common framework, common challenges. It's quite instructive to also say that we now have a platform to engage the international creditors, both bilateral and commercial creditors, on the way to restructure debt. So the good thing about the common framework is that it gives us a platform. But the major challenge we have, like my other colleagues mentioned, is a time frame. Ghana did it in 18 months, from the time we applied to the time we got an MOU. But as we speak, we are still not through the process yet. Even though we have agreed on the terms, we still need to go to bilateral agreements with each country. So in as much as we can say to a large extent we have agreed on the terms, the details are still being worked at. So we are still not there yet when it comes to Ghana. The other thing is, one major thing that delayed Ghana's process, I should say, was the determination of the cut-off dates. There is this concept of cut-off dates beyond which every envelope of debt is restructurable. And I believe that, it should have been determined scientifically, i.e., there was a debt sustainability analysis, so we knew the envelope of debt that needs to be restructured to get a country back on a sustainable path. So from there, we can fix a cut-off date. We know the stock of debt of the country. We can fix a cut-off date. But it looked more like, I wouldn't say arbitrary, but it looked more like countries looking to have as much of their debt outside the envelope as possible. So there was back and forth on the cut-off dates, and that's sort of delayed. There was also the treatment of other multilateral institutions. Oh, should I say plurilateral institutions like the Afrexim Bank? And are they a preferred creditor? Are they not? So that process in itself also brought a bit of delay in the case of Ghana. We also were talking about how, I don't know the experience for Zambia and Chad, but most of the time you are not in the room as a debtor country. You are not in the room. The creditor countries sit, parry, agree on terms, and then you are informed. Of course, you may have an advisor, but if we find ourselves more in the room, we can be able to challenge some so-called unacceptable terms, which would drag the process, because at the time an agreement is being made, if we are in the room, we can have a voice. But as it stands now, it is a bit tamed, our voice. And then, much as the common framework gives a common platform for debts, for bilateral and other commercial debt to be restructured, it doesn't cover all the stock of debts. As we speak, we are still having to deal with over 50 commercial creditors who are not part of this framework. So, yes, it's a platform, but it does not encompass all external debts. And, we have this London Club and Paris Club sort of arrangements. Maybe Africa should propose the Accra Club, where all these other agencies, all these other creditors will come together, commercial, bilateral, multilateral, everybody in the room, including debtor countries, to sit down and determine the stock of debt, the debt sustainability analysis part as determined by the IMF and the World Bank, what needs to be restructured, the terms at which, and the projection, the economic performance projection of the country, to determine what's the best restructuring terms possible. Because Ghana, we're very lucky that with what we went through didn't result in a social unrest. But in many, many countries, it would have been a bit unforgivable. So it is important that the countries are in the room because they understand their circumstances better. I'll just drop one advice to our other colleagues. I mean, there are over 20 countries in Africa now who are heading towards debt unsustainability. They are in high debt distress. What I can say, or what we Ghana will say, is that popular proverb, if you find yourself in a hole, the first thing you have to do is to stop digging. Digging. And try as much as possible to stop digging, stop the borrowing binge, and just pause and reflect and see where you are going. It is also important that we have our capacity built so that internally we can have a means of determining our debt sustainability analysis by ourselves and inputting them and having a going sort of on the run sort of debt sustainability analysis so that every day or every month you know where your debt is heading based on the required parameters as prescribed by the IMF and the World Bank. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so very much. I think these are very, what I'll call nuggets that can really help countries to know how to deal with these challenges they face. You're right. It's common framework, common challenges for all the countries indeed. And I can relate to what I've heard from the three countries, Chad, Ghana, and Zambia. But I like this final advice or lessons that you really extend, which is countries should stop digging when you are in a hole, which means the solution to restructuring your debt is not more debt, or should not be more debt. You need to find a way to say, what do I even have that I could use? And that's where, for us at the African Development Bank, for example, we try to encourage countries to think strategically, innovatively, inwardly. You have a lot of resources within your reach that you need to tap into. Our African Economic Outlook 2025, I hope some colleagues have found time to read through it. It says, how do we make capital work better for Africa? How do we make Africa's capital work better for Africa? And talking about that, we have different capital, whether it is human capital, whether it is financial capital, whether it is business capital, whether it is natural capital. So it's important, therefore, like you rightly say, instead of digging yourself and going deeper down the drain, think strategically about what are those opportunities that exist that you can tap into. Think seriously about innovative domestic resource mobilization. That is one very important way that one can really get itself out of such a mess. Now, let's try and go around. I'm very sure we are listening very attentively and we're taking notes and noting questions that you will want to ask because we'll have time to open it up for the audience to participate. Now, let me come back to you, Mr. Ponyong. Again, like I said earlier, we are aware, and you have actually mentioned the number of countries that you have assisted over the time. So, but the question is, what are the common legal hurdles or what you may call contentious clauses that you see in some of the, loan conditions that have been contracted by countries that sometimes limit them from effective, speedy restructuring?
Look, I mean, first, to be honest, there's the sheer complexity of the topic, right? It's when we talk about either loan contracting or debt restructuring, we're talking, 100 pages documents with 200 pages annexes, each annex being more technical or complex than the other. So there's then the multi-layer. There's macroeconomic, considerations, commodities consideration. I mean, it's a whole host of complex issues that you try to pack and make sense of in a document, that is supposed to give rise to the country borrowing and implementing its development plan, etc. So there's the sheer complexity of the topic, and the fact that, like I mentioned earlier, the exposure to the type of documentation that governs debt contracting or borrowing, the exposure is also limited in terms of the turnaround of transactions that one can be exposed to. So that complexity in itself is a challenge that one needs to first internalize and then try to address. There's also the recent strong fragmentation of the creditor base. So whether you're dealing with bilateral, whether you're dealing with a multilateral, whether you're dealing with a commercial, the language is not the same. The solutions you're likely to craft for the benefit of the country are not the same. So there's a specific language, construct, understanding, and way of negotiating for each of these different categories of creditors. I think one issue that may not have been factored into our loan agreements in the past is probably the occurrence of adverse events, and how does the occurrence of a pandemic, how does the occurrence of a decrease or significant impact on commodities prices, how can those events be factored into the construct of your loan documentation ahead of time, so that when the worst occurs, there is a mechanism that is able to absorb this shock. So, I mean, that's the kind of mindset that comes with being a lawyer. You think of the worst, you plan for the worst, and then you're hoping that everything goes well. But when the worst does occur, then there's something you have in place to absorb the shock. So there needs, around the table, there needs to be an open and fair discussions on those issues and the potential occurrence of adverse event that may affect your ability to reimburse according to plan. But I think one challenge, but that's also linked to the complexity. It's the protractive negotiations. As negotiations stall or are hindered by maybe lack of one party or the other to make progress, either because they don't know how to make progress or they're stumbling on issues that that have not been planned or that have not been thought through. That in itself is a challenge because then becoming innovative or creative or your ability to make the discussion move is seriously hindered. So I mean, in face of all that, there's been some, there are some, specifically speaking to the fragmented creditor base. Collective action clauses is, for instance, one mechanism, that helps you bring all the creditors on the table, and avoid the that fragmentation, that initial fragmentation from hampering your efforts to restructure your debt. But one thing is to have those mechanisms. I mean, collective action clause, for instance. One other thing is to know how to structure the collective action clause to make it work for your specific issue. And to your point, sir, about the Accra Club, not only do I like the name, Accra Club, I think it sounds sexy, but I think the Accra Club could actually, you also need borrower coordination, as much as you have the forums, you have Paris Club, London Club. At some point, there will also have to be a concerted and well thought through borrower coordination for borrowers to be able to to have a common denominator as to their expectations, as to what their strengths and weaknesses are. Of course, each market being different and specific. But there's a common voice, a common denominator that borrowers also needs to come forward with and come to the table with a view that is not too divergent from one borrower to the other. So there are some discussions and initiatives around borrower coordination. And I mean, seeing Ghana's experience, my maybe 2 cents suggestion would be for maybe Ghana to take the lead in rallying borrowers in a borrower coordination initiatives, such that we can move the agenda of sound debt restructuring, sound debt renegotiation forward in a concerted manner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pognon. I know I'll come to this point about Accra Club, really. It's a very interesting one. And I've been in a few meetings in the past where some have really tried to float this idea that just like we have Creditors Club, it's also good that we have Debtors Club. And the idea is to be able to also have a common voice and be able to engage, which I agree with. But I know you do a lot of capacity development, and you did mention it earlier. And you did mention institutional capacity development, for example. I know loan agreements could be some of the issues that some of African countries are facing. Are there any specific support you provide on strengthening the institutional weaknesses we see across countries when it comes to helping them to be able to have loan agreements that are tight, as it were, and can help them to really deal and not have ambiguity and all those challenges when it comes to? Do you have one or two examples or something? So
the first relevant initiative in that regard is the ALSF Academy, which has some content and relevant content. Also informed by our 15 years of experience, in working with governments, which has some contents that is relevant in terms of loan negotiation. We even go to the basics, right? Because after all, what is captured in a contract is what is going to inform the life of that loan, for the years to come. And the hope is that once your contract is signed, then there's no event that gets a government to try and pull out, because then, of course, that ruins your credibility as a as a borrower, as an investment destination, and all that. So the aim is even providing the basic guidance for sound loan documentation drafting in accordance to your needs as a country, is something that we provide in the ALSF Academy. But it's funny that you mentioned loan negotiation, because in next month, actually, jointly with our member TDB, the Trade and Development Group Bank, Trade and Development Bank Group, TDB, we are having a 2 days training in Addis. It's in Addis or Nairobi? I think it's in Nairobi. So jointly with TDB, we're having a loan negotiation training. It's actually a contract negotiation training, but with a focus on loan documentation. So these are the kind of initiatives that we undertake from time to time, also based on the demand that we see. Sometimes we're more proactive, because we know that for a fact there's a need to reinforce the capacity of our government in terms of loan negotiation. We are putting this event together with TDB, who are also very much in touch with governments when it comes to negotiating their own loan documentation with their clients.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much for those additional information. So country members who are here, if you need to tap into these very interesting provisions that are already made available, please reach out and ensure you benefit from that. I see fingers are pointing at you again. So now, but let's focus on something slightly different. For sure, Ghana must have undertaken a lot of reforms or some institutional changes that help you to be able to accommodate the changes that you want to see, that help you to either strengthen your public debt management framework and so on. Can you share with us some of these actions that were taken in terms of the reforms, the institutional changes, and so we can see how countries can learn from that as well?
I'll just start off with the first advice I gave, to stop digging. So what we did was that we instituted, or we went through, and are going through some strong fiscal consolidation led by expenditure rationalization. So, hitherto we always talk about fiscal consolidation as almost always bringing in one revenue handle or the other and burdening the populace with more taxes. But what we did was that we actually scrapped some taxes and cut more expenditure. We actually sent expenditure back to 2023 levels and realized that we have become more efficient with expenditure management. When we started, there were talks about affecting growth. But I must say that with the realignment of expenditure and efficiency of same, we recorded the first quarter GDP growth of 5.3%, 2025 first quarter 5.3%, far above expectation. And this is compared to 3.6% the last quarter of 2024, when we were not consolidating expenditure. So it should tell you that if we really focus on the component of our expenditure, many of the debts we rake up to fund those expenditure may not be needed. The other thing we did is that we have established by law what we call the Fiscal Council to sort of make it a permanent feature, the fiscal discipline we have put in place, so that if another finance minister or another or a group and a new set of rulers or leaders come to power, they'll be constrained by law to live in a fiscally responsible way. In that, I mean, those of us, the economists here, if a country is doing 1.5 primary surplus a year, that is huge. Coming from a deficit of 4.4% or 3.9%, we are planning to do a 1.5% primary surplus for the next 10 years. And this we have enacted into law. So it is actually, it will be a crime to present a budget to Parliament without a primary surplus of 1.5%. We have also amended our PFM rules again to set a debt rule to get to a debt to GDP of 45% by 2034. And these are things we have enacted into law. And then one thing we realized was that there were a lot of off-budget expenditure which caused the debt to spiral out of control. So we have also amended the public financial management law to make authorization from the finance minister only before any MD or government agency can enter into contracts. You need express written authorization from the finance minister. So no government official can enter into any contract which imposes expenditure on the consolidated fund without the prior approval of the finance minister. And you can actually go to jail for 5 years if you fail to do so. And then what we did was that we realized that a lot of the time the expenditure overrun and the borrowing overrun occurred at the multilateral and bilateral level, i.e., we sort of took our eyes off what we call World Bank loans, Africa Development Bank loans, and other multilateral loans. What we have done is that we've placed a cap on how much we can draw from the World Bank, Africa Development Bank, and all those other multilateral agencies. For example, this year we have a cap of $300 million, beyond which we are not going to borrow. Even if the skies may fall, it can wait. And we have passed it into law. So these are the stringent measures we have put in place to ensure that we don't find ourselves where we found ourselves between 2022 and 2024.
Super, super. I think those are really good lessons to learn. Institutionalization of these rules or these laws are very important. Otherwise, as we know in Africa, if a new government comes in, the other one leaves, without those reforms institutionalized, then it becomes an issue. But when you already have them coded in the country's laws, regulations, it makes life a lot easier. And I think that's a good lesson to learn from there. Let me come to you now, Madame Luandamina. I know one of the objectives of debt restructuring is to improve the image of the country, especially before your creditors. Now, to what extent has your restructuring your debt improved your relationship with your creditors, whether they are bilateral creditors, whether they are multilateral, or those we call emerging creditors, like China, Brazil, and so on?
It's interesting that you would say that debt restructuring improves image, because I think for a number of the African countries, the reason why they don't necessarily want to come into maybe institutions like restructuring under the common framework is it's almost always associated with a downgrade. So, but on the other side of the coin is once you restructure, if after you structure you walk the talk, it definitely will be image building for the country. I'll give ourselves as an example, because after we restructured our Euro bond, we had a successful bond exchange, and we have been current with our debt service payments ever since. So in that case, it is image building, but before you build your image, the default breaks it down. Yeah, and then in terms of what the restructuring is doing in terms of our relationships, I think it's forcing us to be closer, because you must understand the constraints of your creditors in order for you to restructure. And maybe that's why it's taken some time, because the constraints are so diverse. You have internal policies from certain banks which don't allow them to do certain things, but then you are also required under the restructuring to perform certain actions. So it has led to a deeper understanding of each other. I think that is very important to recognize. And then it's also, I think for us as a country, it's led us to realize the need to pay more attention to investor and stakeholder relations. Sometimes it's a by the way, so I think we need to have deliberate, proactive engagements with our stakeholders before you even reach the restructuring table. So for Zambia, we have set up a debt management office, and within the debt management office, we have sections which are now looking at just that aspect of bilateral investor relations outside the restructuring. So we have a market communication section, reporting and communication. So these are still quite new, but it is to deepen that relationship with our creditors. And it's been bittersweet, because under the restructuring, you are learning quite a lot from each other, but there's a lot of respect. There's a lot of proactiveness, I think, from both sides. So the lesson is, yes, we have had 10 steps back and 5 steps forward, but eventually at the end of this story, I know Ghana, Zambia, we are all going to have deeper relationships with our creditors. And I also support the need for us as borrower countries to also develop this relationship. So I think we thank your institution for bringing us together. But after this, Ghana, Chad, and Zambia should have a little club, and we should encourage the countries which are coming behind us and show them that it can be done.
Super. Thank you very much. Very good points you made there. Huh? Okay. Accra Club. Absolutely. We really get to hear the thoughts from participants, what they think about this Accra Club, which we are forming. Now, let me come to Mr. Donatien. Now, debt distress, restructuring, we expect to see some impact on socioeconomic activities, or socioeconomic variables, if you like, statistics, for example. Population will be affected. Other socioeconomic services will be affected. So what are the main impact of the debt distress and the restructuring of debt on some of these socioeconomic activities, the population, and so on in Chad?
Ok, merci pour cette question. Vous savez, comme j'avais dit tout à l'heure, le Tchad était en situation de surendettement élevé. Quand on est en situation de surendettement élevé, c'est que le service de la dette est élevé par rapport aux revenus qu'on engrange chaque année. Donc le Tchad, le plus souvent, depuis quelques années, une grosse part des revenus pétroliers sont partis dans le service de la dette. Pourtant, le Tchad fait face à plusieurs défis, des défis socio-économiques. Les ressources qui devraient normalement affecter à ces secteurs pour le développement de la population sont utilisées pour rembourser le service de la dette. Raison pour laquelle le Tchad a restructuré sa dette dans le cadre du G20. Et cette situation a permis d'avoir certaines marges de manœuvre pour financer certains projets de développement. Donc l'impact de cette restructuration a eu quand même des effets tangibles Ça a permis au gouvernement de relancer certaines activités qui étaient aux arrêts lorsque le choc était arrivé dans les 5 dernières années. Donc je crois que la situation a permis à ce que le gouvernement puisse avoir certaines marges de manœuvre pour financer certains projets de développement. Je voulais également parler de certains efforts que le gouvernement a fait ces dernières années pour réformer les finances publiques. Comme mon collègue tout à l'heure a parlé, qu'on ne doit pas continuer toujours à creuser. Il est vrai, le gouvernement a mis certaines réformes qui ont porté quand même des fruits. Ces réformes concernaient d'abord la digitalisation des finances publiques. Et depuis 2 ans, ces réformes ont apporté des résultats positifs. Et ça permet également au gouvernement de financer les projets de développement. Et le gouvernement a mis en place également certaines réformes en matière de gouvernance économique, surtout en rationalisant les dépenses publiques. Et ça permet à ce que nous avons eu quand même de croissance économique depuis 2 ans. Donc, en un mot, je peux dire que la situation a apporté quand même un plus qui a permis au gouvernement de financer certains projets socio-économiques. Merci.
Thank you very much. Very, very good point there. Now let's throw it open. We've heard a lot from our panelists here. So please, let's get the microphones ready so we can move around the room as quickly as possible. So what are your comments? What are your thoughts? Do you have additional insights into what you have heard? Do you have some questions you want to ask that can help you with what you have to deal with in your respective countries? Or some other lessons? The floor is open, please. Yes, let's start with you, sir. Okay, then I'll take the lady next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Thanks to the panelists for that insightful discussion. My first question goes to the representative from Ghana. So, of course, part of the question was answered. That is what reforms you have taken under this. But like now, the question is, how were you able to accelerate, this restructuring process, to the level of implementation and the figures we just had this morning, as opposed to the challenge Zambia has faced for over 2 years to get into the agreement? I think that will be a good lesson for the rest of the countries. What are the necessary conditions and procedures that will accelerate the process? Because waiting for 2 years, many things could happen, may take you back to square one again. So the second question, in your process, is ALFS, the role they played, do they play any role? Did you engage them in the process of getting into the restructuring process, the legal support team? So we want to know, how do we start with? Because, of course, you mentioned about the IMF, the World Bank, sustainability analysis, knowing what data restructure and so on. So, but we also want to see how, the legal support was, whether they were involved and the role they played in the process. And to the Zambia, of course, you mentioned it took 2 years. So that also, if you could, what are the impediments that led to that long process so that one could be able to avoid? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
May we know you, please, to ask your question, just brief introduction of yourself so we know who is asking the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Mr. Karamo Jawara. I'm Director of Banking and Payments, Central Bank of the Gambia. Thank you.
Super. Thank you very much. So I'm taking the lady next.
Ok, bonjour et merci beaucoup. Je me présente, c'est Madame Ibrahim Habiba du ministère de l'économie et des finances du Niger. Donc, moi, ma question, c'est par rapport aux panélistes. Il y a celui du Ghana, il avait parlé de s'arrêter, de s'endetter. Donc, j'aimerais qu'il nous explique comment le Ghana a pu faire face à sa dette et d'arrêter de s'endetter. Je ne sais pas, j'aimerais savoir si c'est le Ghana, maintenant il est au stade de dette zéro. Et ensuite, j'aimerais savoir, vous avez parlé de la Banque mondiale, parmi les panélistes, je ne sais pas, il y a quelqu'un qui a parlé de l'aide de la Banque mondiale et du FMI. J'aimerais savoir, est-ce que la BAD a apporté un appui pour vous aider à sortir de l'endettement? Vraiment, si on peut nous donner les pistes que vous avez tous utilisées pour faire face, ça va nous faire beaucoup plaisir. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. Yes, right there. So then we'll take a second round after responding to the... So please go ahead, Issa.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Garaz Gher from Eritrea. Let me first express my thanks and gratitude for the African Development Bank for inviting my country to this important capacity building training. I've got a couple of questions. Number one is to Mr. Pagnon. From his explanation, he has assisted various countries in terms of giving debt management training, capacity building, and whatnot. My question is, do you have any experience? Do you have any experience in areas where you have assisted some countries in the initial debt agreement with the creditors? This is the first question. So what is your experience on that aspect? The second question I have is related to the extractive industrial agreements, which is very important at the moment for our African countries. Africa has got a very abundant resources in terms of minerals. Have you ever assisted some African countries when they enter into the shareholding, when they try to come into agreement with the various explorers, mining explorers? Because from my knowledge, I know that many of our African countries do not get the shares they deserve. So, have you advised some countries in terms of shareholding so that the shareholding of the respective countries could be accessible as possible, and that can enable that country to enable the required income from the extractive industry? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So let's come back to the panel to respond to those questions. Then we'll take a second round of questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to start with my sister from Niger. You asking if Ghana is debt-free, and that how did Ghana stop borrowing? What I said was that if you find yourself borrowing overmuch, which is resulting in the debt unsustainability, the first thing is to stop borrowing. What Ghana did was that we looked at our expenditure book. We looked at what we are spending our money on, and we realized that we don't need to borrow as much to finance all these expenditures. So what we did was to cut expenditure. By cutting expenditure and redirecting its efficiency to the productive sectors of the economy, what we have done is that we have actually delivered better growth with less borrowing. We still borrow, we are still drawing down on World Bank and Africa Development Facilities, but we are doing so within the limits we have set for ourselves. Like I mentioned, we plan on getting to a debt to GDP ratio of 45% by 2034. Currently, we are doing about 50% because of better than expected economic performance. We're supposed to get to 50% by about 2030, but because of the reforms and the depth of the expenditure cuts we undertook, we are already 50%, and we anticipate to get to the 45% by the end of next year, way off target, way better than we anticipated as to getting it in 2034. The other question from my brother in Gambia was, how were we able to accelerate the process? I must say that we were not the first to make a request to the common framework. So just maybe that we benefited from the experiences of Zambia and maybe Chad. When they went there, maybe the processes were not as developed. They were still teething problems, so we benefited from the lessons they learned. But the other thing I also want to add is that, you know, the essence of this gathering is to help us build our capacity. Most of the times, the delays and the back and forth can largely be attributed to the gap in capacity between the creditors and the debtors. If you have a bit of capacity, if there is some way, there's some way you can sort of expedite the process by your own capacity, it makes the process smoother. So it is important that we take what we are going to do here, that is this training program, seriously, to build our capacity, to ensure that these processes are by in and themselves smoother by our own sort of strengthening or technical know-how. And as to the role of ALFSS and many roles, including the broader Africa Development Bank, played key role in assisting us to go through our restructuring. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think we can take another round of questions before we come to the ALSF questions. Okay, let me go to the back. So I see 3 hands there. Can we take those 3 hands there?
Hi, thank you so much.
Yes, 2, 3. Please go ahead. Yes, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Abdi Fita from Somalia. I'm head of Parliamentary Budget Office. I have 2 questions from my brother from Ghana, especially the expenditure control. My question is, you have mentioned it, and sorry. My question goes to my brother from Ghana, and he has mentioned about how Ghana went for expenditure control. And the question is, how did you manage the MDAs? And you have also mentioned that if any person committed and have procurement issue with anyone without notice from Ministry of Finance, they will face a punishment of 5 years. On behalf of the legislative, I have to understand, is this was before it was issued for legally? It's like, for example, there has been a bill, an act, or amendment that everyone who committed this, they will have to face such consequence. And the second question is, for example, in my country, Somalia, some institutions, they have what's called off budget. And they have consumed it however they see it's important to their institutions. So in that question, again, how did you manage for that one? And the other question, I hope you understand my...
It looks like the second question is not clear. Can you rephrase it and very crispy
the second question is, for example, in Somalia, some institutions, they get from donors some funds, which is not coming through the direct, what's called single treasury account. They use their own way, they come through their private channel, while we have the Accountant General here with me. If I did another mistake, he will clarify. But we have seen that they get through that channel for private banks, but at the same time, they have approval from the Accountant General to use that. But when it comes to the expenditure, they use their own way to expenditure for that. So when it comes to it's part of expenditure control. So I just wanted to understand, when you say the banishment is 5 years, so the Parliament of Ghana have approved that one, or the Minister of Finance dictated? My last question is, you said when the new government came, it doesn't affect the expenditure control policy. How did you manage when you have a new government which makes a lot of promises to the people who voted in the election time, and they need to fulfill what have they promised before? How did you manage for that? Thank you so much.
Right, thank you. Next, please. Yes, please, you have the floor.
Bonjour à tous. Donc, je réponds au nom d'Ilias Lada Ibrahim. Je représente la Banque centrale BCAO pour le Niger, Direction nationale pour le Niger. Ma question, en fait, va directement aux représentants du Ghana. Et j'aimerais savoir, c'est-à-dire connaître un peu les chiffres. C'est-à-dire avec combien de créanciers vous avez eu d'accord? Et quel est le montant de votre dette avant la restructuration? Et à quel montant vous êtes abouti après le processus? Donc ça, c'est ma première question. De savoir juste le montant et le nombre de créanciers avec lesquels vous avez eu d'accord. Ma seconde question va, comment dirais-je, à LSF, c'est de savoir quels sont les instruments que vous utilisez dans le processus de restructuration de cette dette-là. C'est-à-dire, est-ce que plus vous utilisez la réduction des taux d'intérêt ou la réduction, comment dirais-je, de façon globale les services de la dette, c'est ce que vous utilisez, ou le rééchelonnement de la dette. C'est-à-dire, quels sont les instruments que vous utilisez pour aboutir à la restructuration de cette dette-là? Donc là, c'est un peu les deux questions que je voulais poser. Merci.
Thank you very much. My name is Matthew Sandi. I'm the Director of Public Debt Management Division in the Ministry of Finance. I will start my question with Sierra Leone, Ministry of Finance, Government of Sierra Leone. I just want to give a quick clip of what happened in Sierra Leone recently. It's almost similar to what happened in Ghana, only that we have not entered the international capital market. Inflation was above 52% 2 years ago. Interest rates rose above 40%, 41% a year ago, and all of that. And then, of course, the fiscal challenge, the only thing we didn't go up to 16% of GDP in terms of fiscal deficit. But the point is, we did not go the restructuring route. But I would like to pose this question after what happened recently. All of that, fast forward, has changed. Inflation is now in single digits from 52% about 2 years ago. Now we're at 7.5%. You check on our website. Interest rates collapsed from 41% about 2-3 months ago, about a quarter ago. Now it's 15.77%. And the exchange rate is stable. So the question is, which option is better in terms of adjustment? Is it restructuring or fiscal adjustment? In the Ghana case, I think it was a combined. But which option is really better and more sustainable that can lead to, because you also have the private sector, you have to maintain your contracts, doing business ranking. How do you keep the private sector, the confidence in the private sector, which is really the bedrock of your economic sustainability? That is one question. The next one is rebasing of the GDP. We saw that actually helps us a lot. So as we want to see how debt will work better for Africa, we should be the best to measure our GDP. And I think that is one thing that helps us a lot in Sierra Leone. When we rebased the GDP, it was not rebased for about almost 15 years. And even right now, we are almost close to rebasing again. But we just rebased like 2-3 years ago. That helped a lot in terms of improving the debt to GDP. So those are the comments and the questions I would like to pose. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think if you can take not more than 30 seconds to ask your question, I'll give the opportunity to the two hands I'm having. If it's more than 30 seconds, I'm going to stop you because of time. So yes, let's take you, sir, with that commitment in mind.
Thank you very much. I'm Justin Joseph Marona, Chair of Public Accounts, Parliament of South Sudan. I want to ask Ghana, the Ghana model, I think we can learn out of it. And then I want to know whether Ghana put a specific strategic plan for expenditure control, and how much years that Ghana really expect positive results to affect positively on the utilization of debts. Number two, how did Ghana overcome the institutional capacity to assist the issue on the debt management? Because in my country, okay, the issue of institutional capacity is critical. Thank you.
Well understood. Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Can you please? Yes.
Merci beaucoup aux panélistes. La première question s'adresse à l'ASLF. Je voudrais savoir si, dans leur expérience, ils ont rencontré des clauses qui compromettent les pays. Et quelles sont ces clauses-là les plus fréquemment rencontrées? La deuxième question, c'est au niveau de toujours...
Sorry, 1 minute. We're not getting the translation through. Can you, IT colleagues, can you help us check? Yes, we can hear you now.
OK.
Please go ahead.
Donc, je reprends. La première question est relative aux clauses rencontrées dans les conventions de financement. Est-ce que vous rencontrez des clauses spécifiques qui compromettent généralement les pays? Et si oui, quels en sont quelques exemples que vous pouvez nous donner? La deuxième question est relative au type de bailleurs. Dans les négociations, il y a des groupes de bailleurs qui sont sensibles, il y a des bailleurs qui ne sont pas sensibles aux restructurations. Quel type de bailleur est plus réticent aux restructurations de la dette? Et la troisième question s'adresse au Ghana. Quel a été l'impact de la dette intérieure dans la situation de surendettement du Ghana? Et est-ce qu'il y a eu un traitement particulier de cette catégorie de dettes? Merci.
Okay. Okay. I'm tempted to take one more hand because she's a lady. And then the conversation can always continue. Okay. Two ladies are competing for the last spot. Okay, so I'll take you, then I'll take you. Then we'll close.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Je réponds au nom de Mamaniar Oumalkirou. Et ma question est de savoir quelle est l'importance de la transparence et de la communication avec les créanciers dans le processus de la restructuration de la dette. Et la deuxième question, ça rejoint la question de mon collègue. Quelles options de restructuration ont déjà été utilisées par le Tchad? Par exemple, le rééchelonnement, l'annulation, etc. Merci.
Thank you very much. Very succinct and straightforward. So the last, yes, please.
Bonjour à tous, je m'appelle Mariama Silla, je suis de la Banque centrale de Guinée. Je sais que le Ghana a eu beaucoup de questions, mais je voudrais également m'adresser au Ghana. Je pense que le représentant a indiqué qu'ils sont actuellement, ils étaient plutôt avant le rééchelonnement, si j'ai bien noté, à 50% du PIB, le taux d'endettement. Et donc que l'objectif est d'aller à 45% du taux d'endettement. J'aimerais savoir, les 45% ont été fixés sur quelle base? Okay? Quelle est la stratégie qui est mise en place pour aller vers ces 45%? Merci.
Thank you very much. So let's come back to our panel in no particular order, but I can start with Monsieur Pognon because you had the first round of questions, so you can just take them all together. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, colleagues, for the questions. I'll quickly go through the ones that I've noted for ALSF. Experience with initial debt agreements with creditors. Yes, we do have experience in helping countries structure and document, for instance, Eurobond issuance. That was the case for Zimbabwe. That was also the case for Senegal, Cameroon as well. So, yes, experience with, and like I said, we also train our member countries on, loan negotiation, loan contracting, the fundamentals, and a bit more than that. So, the answer to your question, sir, is yes, we do have experience and precedents that we can use to assist the government of Eritrea if that's needed. The question from the gentleman regarding extractive industries. Yes, so extractive industries is one of the historic areas of intervention of ALSF, and we have assisted countries across the continent with structuring the debt or equity arrangements for the mining operations in the country. So state-owned equity and shareholding of sovereign shareholding in the country is something that we are quite familiar with, and we've also issued a guide on state-owned equity participation. That was 2-3 years ago. We've issued that guide alongside the World Bank. So that's a tool you can also find on our website. I think the next question, monsieur a demandé quels sont les instruments utilisés dans le processus de restructuration. Là, évidemment, ça dépend du est-ce que c'est la réduction de dette, le rééchelonnement, ça dépend vraiment des circonstances et de la demande, de la stratégie particulière qu'entend suivre le gouvernement. J'ai en tête des négociations que nous menons actuellement avec un pays en particulier qui vise à obtenir de la part de créanciers bilatéraux des annulations de dettes ou en tout cas des réductions significatives de dettes de manière à ce que le pays puisse ensuite, sur la base d'une négociation fructueuse avec ses créanciers bilatéraux, engager des négociations, une discussion qu'ils espèrent fructueuse avec le FMI pour un programme. Et dans d'autres cas, ça peut être, parce que les fondamentaux du pays le permettent, ça peut être aussi des rééchelonnements de dette. Donc ça dépend vraiment de la demande et de la stratégie du pays, informé notamment par son analyse de la viabilité de la dette. Monsieur a demandé les clauses qui compromettent les pays. Je vais, sans peut-être rentrer dans les détails pour des raisons confidentielles, mais peut-être qu'on peut se voir après avec mon collègue Victor pour vous donner un peu plus d'informations sur ce type de sujet, mais on peut avoir des clauses de remboursement anticipé, on peut avoir des clauses de force majeure qui ne seraient pas bien rédigées ou bien structurées, mais c'est une discussion qu'on peut avoir séparément. Et la dernière question sur le type de bailleurs qui sont les plus réticents aux restructurations. Je ne saurais pas vraiment donner une réponse ferme là-dessus. On sait que les restructurations de dettes sont parfois des processus où une large majorité ou une unanimité est requise. Pour les clauses d'action collective, par exemple, je crois que c'était 75% des bailleurs qui doivent être autour de la table. Dans le lot, vous pouvez avoir des bilatéraux, vous pouvez avoir des On a constaté aussi, en tout cas ma petite expérience me montre que les multilatéraux ne sont pas nécessairement les plus flexibles, mais il peut arriver aussi que des bilatéraux, à cause des accumulations de dettes, soient aussi assez réticents. Donc tout dépend, là encore, j'ai pas de réponse ferme, mais tout dépend vraiment des circonstances.
Thank you very much. So back to Ghana. Thank you very much. My friend from Somalia was asking about the expenditure or commitment control. Yes, it is an act of parliament. We went to parliament to pass it into law, and it was assented to by the president. So if you look at Ghana laws now, it is a crime for any MDA or any minister or any government official to enter into contracts or to initiate procurement without the written authorization from the Minister of Finance. Then it means that there cannot be any off-budget expenditure. Everything or every request you brought should have been appropriated by the budget. The other question is how you deal with multilateral or development partner funds. That's a very good question, because a lot of the time we see these funds as sort of, should I say, free or something, the World Bank Fund and all those things. And because most of the times they are concessional. What we do now here is that we require, even for grants, not just for World Bank concessional loans and multilateral, even for grants, you are required to appropriate it in the budget. So you cannot make any expenditure either from a grant or from any of these multilateral agencies without first of all appropriating it in the budget. And which budgets you are supposed, or the finance minister is supposed to present to Parliament and make and show a primary surplus of 1.5%. So it's all captured in that fiscal framework. The other thing is that, how do we fulfill our election promises? I told you that we are refocusing the expenditure. For example, we've cut expenditure in the size of governments. We're having about 120 ministers. Now we have less than 60. We have cut foreign travels. We've cut so many things to refocus the spending on the productive sectors of the economy. We also had a question about, I also had a question about which one is better, is it restructuring or adjustment? I think you answered it in your follow-up because you need a bit of both. If you find yourself in a situation where the debt is unsustainable, sometimes the only way you need or the only way out is restructuring. But you need a bit of adjustments to, or you need a lot of adjustment, I should say, to return to sustainability. And then somebody asked about the expenditure controls. When are we expecting to have some positive effects? We've already started experiencing the positive effects of what we have done. Like I mentioned earlier, the cedi has been adjudged the best performing currency lately. We've appreciated by on average about 35 to 40% across the between the cedi and the major trading currencies. We have reduced our debt to GDP to 50% now. We have also brought down inflation from close to 30% to now 18%. Government bills rates on government T-bill rates, which were hovering around 30%, is now on the average about 14%. So we've seen the benefits of the fiscal adjustment or the expenditure controls. And then somebody asked about the best way to determine debt sustainability. I think we all know that GDP doesn't pay debts. So to determine debt sustainability, you should look at your debt service to revenue ratio, your external debt service to exports revenue ratio. There are so many metrics that we can use, but there's now the debt to GDP ratio is now being questioned of its sustainability or its effectiveness in managing or helping countries to manage their debts. So it's a conversation that is being had now. And then there is also, there was also the question of how did we treat our domestic debts? I mean, prior to we securing the IMF deal, we have to undergo a domestic debt restructuring. And that is for the first time in our history. We went through a domestic debt restructuring where all domestic debts, we had over 90% participation, we were restructured. So before the external debt restructuring was a domestic debt restructuring. And then lastly, my sister spoke about how we are going to achieve the 45% and debt to GDP. Yes, we said we are growing GDP-wise, so the denominator is growing, and then we are also borrowing less. So a two-pronged approach, reduce the rate of growth of the numerator and increase the rate of growth of the denominator. So that's how we are going about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know many of us still have a couple of questions, but if we stay here, the conversation will just continue. Our lunch is ready, so we'll be restructuring a little bit. But the conversation will continue. We'll be meeting over lunch, over cocktail, over coffee break. So please feel free to approach any of the panelists here to get further information that you may want. Like you take the floor, do you want to say something quick? You want to say something quick, okay. So
ok,
please,
je voulais apporter un élément de réponse par rapport à l'option que le Tchad a utilisée pour restructurer sa dette. Le Tchad n'a pas bénéficié d'une annulation de sa dette, mais il a plutôt obtenu de rééchelonnement de sa dette. Et le principal créancier qui a pu rééchelonner la dette, c'est le créancier commercial Glencore, qui a accepté de rééchelonner la dette du Tchad, ce qui a permis à ce que nous soyons à une situation de surendettement modéré. Donc l'option utilisée, c'est le rééchelonnement et non l'annulation de la dette. C'est l'élément de réponse que je voulais apporter là. Merci.
Excellent, excellent. So please.
I think there were two questions which were missed. There was a question about the importance of transparency during restructuring. I'm not sure ALSF or Ghana picked up on it. I think transparency is essential in the restructuring process because you are establishing trust with the stakeholders, with the creditors. So I think for Ghana, even for Zambia, even for Chad, transparency has been essential. One of the first things we had to work on internally as Zambia is to work on the credibility of our debt stock. So you can't have a moving target. I think he talked about the cutoff date. So the debt that is reported as at that time was necessary to set the benchmark for restructuring. And I'll quickly touch on, there was a question from Ghana, what took so long for Zambia? It actually has taken us 4 years, it's not 2 years, because we applied to the common framework in 2021, and we only got our official creditor committee formation in 2022, and then the MOU came in 2023. It has taken long, but I believe, as Ghana mentioned, the countries which have come after us have benefited from the lessons which were learned for Zambia. It was a learning curve, not just for us as a country, but for the creditors and the other stakeholders who were involved. So maybe there were parts with regard to the internal capacity that, of course, we will touch on that during the session. But I think even from the creditor perspective, even from supporting institutions such as the IMF, World Bank, ALSF, there was a lot of lessons that were learned. And I believe the countries which will come after us, it will be a very short time to turn things around. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Once again, please a round of applause for my panelists. So because of time, I won't attempt to summarize what we have heard in this session. Very interesting. We've heard different perspectives from the institution that is supporting African countries to do it, and also to countries themselves who are at the receiving end, who are, passing through the challenges, who sees the opportunities, and so on.